Okay, we'll see him in a little bit.
Yep.
He's a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
Good-looking guy. He seems very prompt. Seems like he's ready to go. He's done this before. This is not what they call his first rodeo.
Saddler, farrier, wheelwright, and so on. It's a rigorous training dished out who know all there is to know about horses, and it brings results.
We take you behind the scenes now to show just some of the interesting aspects of this training.
Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine, the award-winning #1 podcast to create sounder horses from the ground up. Mike Stine is a registered journeyman farrier with an APF1 accreditation. On this week's show, we have Dr. Simon Curtis, a farrier that's going to be joining us all the way from across the pond. He's going to be talking about foals and their correction, his PhD studies, and also clinics, workshops, and continuing learning and how important it is. All this and much more will be discussed here on Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. And over to my far right side is Mike Stine. How are you?
I am doing good, Travis. How are you doing today?
Doing all right. So, guess what, Mike?
What's that?
I'm going to Florida.
You are?
I am going to Florida.
Wow. That sounds like loads of fun.
No, we have a house on there, and I got to go down there and kind of trim some trees and stuff so we can put it on the market and stuff. So I'll be gone for a week or so. Well, I'll be back before Monday, so don't worry. I'm just going to drive down for, a little vacay, little trip, little holiday.
Yeah.
What you got going on? Anything?
Well, yeah, I do. I actually had something interesting happen the other day.
It doesn't sound very interesting to start off with.
Well, it is. It was a little surprising to me because, every day when you're messing with horses, you learn something if you're paying attention.
That's what they say.
Supposedly. Hopefully. Anyway, I had a young lady come up to the gate. I was going to visit with her pony and her mother's couple of horses. And she announced to me she found a turtle with an earache.
A turtle with an earache?
A turtle with an earache,
Is this a joke or something?
No, it's not a joke.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. And they got the turtle well, and I was like, okay. So I asked her mom, because this young lady's like 6. And she said, yeah, she found her a turtle at the creek, and apparently turtles can get earaches, and it had like an abscess swollen up, and they can't draw their head back in the
poor thing
in the shell. So they were taking a horse up to the university, and she had called them, and apparently they have a turtle unit at the University of North Carolina. And they took the turtle up there, and they got the turtle taken care of and healthy because they can get ear infections. And then her father went all the way to Raleigh to pick it up, brought it back, and the young lady put it on the rock right where it was, facing the way it was, and released it. And that way it woke up and thought it was having a bad dream. But apparently they work on turtles at the University of North Carolina if you got a turtle with an earache. I was like, I had no idea.
Can I bring my pet ferret up there too?
You probably could.
Do they handle all animals?
I don't know. Maybe, but they do apparently work on some reptiles up there.
Well, that's amazing, though. Because you would think of a turtle, and you're like, well, just let nature be nature, and just, let the horse run out there, or the turtle. Listen to my mind. I'm thinking horses already.
So that was my I learned something today moment.
Well, there you go, Mike.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us. No, we got a big show to get into. Lots to talk about. All the way from over in England, we have Dr. Simon Curtis that's going to be joining us here in the program. So if you're not over on YouTube, join us right now. Jump on over to Equine Dynamics, Mike Stine, over on YouTube. And for every podcast we do, you can see the whole entire video over on the YouTube channel. Give them a like and subscribe over there. And when we come back, we'll bring on Dr. Simon Curtis. So stick around. You're listening to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. He'll be right back. I honestly was not paying attention to you at all.
I believe that.
I was not paying attention. I was like, I forgot the show. I started the show. I'm like, I forgot this. I forgot that. I got into a rush. See, Simon, what normally happens, Mike doesn't get here until 9 o'clock, usually 10 after 9. And then we chit chat and stuff and we talk about things. And
we see where his chickens lay eggs.
Yeah, and the chickens, we have chickens that run free on the farm. So they're out there clucking and cock-a-doodle doing. And we'll sit here and we just, in our leisure, take this time. So when he said that you had to be out by 10, I'm like, yeah, we can start the show an hour early. So my brain is still an hour behind trying to get all the inside stuff back here. It's all behind the scenes stuff, Simon. It's boring. So my brain's not really functioning just yet. I got to put my makeup on this morning.
You look good.
I know. All right. I cut myself shaving right there. You want to talk about prima donna, right, Simon? Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. Don't forget, you can join the podcast. The way you do that is go to equinedynamics.com. At the very top of the page says, join the podcast. Click on that. Has a little orange bar across that. It says, leave a message for Mike Stine. If you've got a device with a microphone on it, you do, because that's the only way you can listen to anything right now is through your phone or through your tablet or through your PC. And all those have microphones on it. So speak right into it. You can be anonymous if you want. It's going to ask for a name. You can be anonymous if you want. It's going to ask for an email address just to make sure you're not a robot. Speak right into it. Be clear. Comes right to our inbox, and we'll play it on the very next podcast. We broadcast every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, in a little town we like to call Marshville. And my very own little town boy over to my far inside is Mike Stine. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you, Travis? And thank you for being with us, Simon.
Pleasure to be here.
And joining us this week, I'm going to ask where he's from, but joining us this week is Dr. Simon Curtis. He's a very world-renowned farrier as well. And thank you for joining us, Dr. Simon Curtis. Where are you coming to us from? I sense an accent.
I'm obviously in England. I'm about 2 hours northeast of London. Up in that part of the country, so London's easy enough to get to, but far enough away when I want to get away from it.
Get away from the bustling streets. Now, I'm going to do like every other dumb American would do. You know, when they say, oh, I'm from Florida, you're like going, oh, do you know Tommy? Tommy lives in Florida. So, Simon, do you know we have another gentleman that we've interviewed out there in England? His name is not Simon Curtis. You're Simon
Kokoza.
Simon Kokoza out there in England. And I forget where he's at, though.
He's in England.
I know, but there's a weird name. It's like Vase or Vass or not Nice.
I don't remember, but he is a dressage rider, and does a lot of in-hand work.
I don't know him.
Oh my God!
But if I bump into him, I will say we've both been on your podcast.
Yeah, right, exactly. I know, but it's just one of those things like, oh, you're from Florida? Don't you know Tommy? No, I don't know Tommy.
I did actually, on one of my first visits to the States, I did have somebody ask me if I knew Paul McCartney. And I said, yes, I do know Paul McCartney, but I doubt if he knows me.
Right, exactly. That's a great answer. So thank you for joining us this week on the show. You are a doctor, but you're a doctor of not necessarily like a DM. Was that a doctor of veterinary medicine?
DVM.
Right, a DVM. You're a doctor of a different sort. So tell us what kind of doctor you are and how that pertains to the horse and the biomechanics and the horse and everything that we talk about here on the show.
Okay, I'm a doctor of philosophy, often shortened to PhD. So that's an academic doctor. So in most countries in the world, including the States, you have a Bachelor of Science, then you have a Master of Science, and then you have a PhD. And I studied for mine part-time, so it took me, well, it was a 6-year course. I did manage to do it in just over 5 years. And my PhD is in equine physiology and locomotion, because I spent my time studying horses' hooves, and that's what my PhD thesis is on. And anybody can download that for free if they search hard enough.
So I always ask the question anytime we have a guest on the show, and the answer is almost unanimously. So I'm going to say, how did you get in the horse community? Obviously, you went to be a doctor and everything, but it's always like the answer that I get is I started on my daddy's farm back in the day, and they didn't have a farrier. They didn't have anyone to, run shoes. I was the only one in the family that rode horses. I was drawn to the horses. I was drawn to the hoofs. So are any of these checking off boxes for you as far as how you got started into the business?
No, none of them, Travis. None of them. I was bred. I am at least 4th generation farrier, so I'm genetically programmed to shoe horses. And that's what happened. And I had my father, 3 uncles, and 2 brothers, all shoeing from the same forge at one point in my life.
Wow.
So that's where I came from, a different sort of way. As I say, I was bred for it.
So you're 4 generations. You're 4 generations of farriers, and And so that's got to span, let's say, average life of a human is 80 years. So you're looking at 4, so that's 320 years. Now, Mike was telling me there was a period in our history where we totally lost how we approach horses as far as, a workhorse as to the domesticated horses that we now see mostly that have come up through, the 20th century. Is there writings or anything that your ancestors or your grandfathers had that you can refer back to as far as that lost period of history? I don't know what time period that was, but, we always, here in the Americas, we always have, Mike always refers to, there's a period where we weren't sharing our knowledge with our predecessors and so on. They kind of kept it to themselves. Do you have any of those, like, writings or, of course, teachings is a given, but...
No, I had teachings because, although I don't remember my grandfather, my father, I apprenticed to him. The only the only literature I have from my family is written on the back of a horseshoe catalogue, and they were clearly gambling in a pub because it was taking
betting on the horses
who owed how much money. So that's the only literature I have from my family. But there are books stretching back. There's books stretching back 400 years, but in fact, the ones that we can still learn something from are probably 150 to 200 years old. And I listened to your interview of Bob Smith, and he does have a phenomenal collection because I've been to his Pacific Coast horseshoeing school. And I also have a good, and it doesn't quite match Bob's, but I've probably got 80 plus old books. So there's a lot of old literature out there, and there is stuff to learn from it because the fundamentals and the basics were known a long time ago. We've been shoeing horses probably for 2,000 years. So
now, how do you use your PhD and apply it to horse being a farrier? Because the way and I'm not taking anything away from the PhD, I always think like a PhD would be the teacher and a farrier would be the doer. Like the hands-on, the blue-collar worker as a white-collar worker. So how do you apply your doctorate to the horse's feet? And then on the same sense, I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, Mike basically started the other way. He's starting on the horses from the feet up, and technically he has some kind of, the psychology of a horse and why it does this way at the same time. I don't know if you got all that.
Well, I started on the horse. I did. I can't remember what you said. But
It's okay. I'll repeat it again.
The last bit first. I left school at 16. Although I went to a good school, I didn't pay a lot of attention. I played football. That's that game which we kick the ball about as opposed to the one
you use your feet with the ball.
Correct. Yeah.
And I was quite good at cricket, which is a sort of refined form of baseball. And that's how I spent my time at school. So I left at 16. I went down the forge. I got an apprenticeship. I did what every other farrier does. And then I sort of started to get a bit bored. And that's how I got into academia. So I am a farrier first and foremost. And since I finished my PhD 10 years ago, I have gradually reverted from a scientist back to being a farrier, where I'm most comfortable. But I also I studied what I was used to seeing, and that's got to be the best thing for not just for me, but the whole point of a PhD is that you have new knowledge, and it's then how you disseminate it. So I've really spent 10 years disseminating some of that, and 90% of the time I'm disseminating to farriers. So I try and use that knowledge through them to help the horse and to continue to improve horseshoeing and especially trimming with young stock.
So once you got your PhD, you looked at the way the horse's feet a little different, or was it almost the same? Like, were you finding like theories from when you work from the ground up as to coming from a PhD and working back down to the hoof? Did you find any theories that were kind of contradicting themselves, and you were like, oh, wait a minute, I know this because of this?
Yeah, well, that's always a great thing to do to say to people. But I think I did find new things. Nobody in scientific literature or any farriers journals has ever said that the hoof compresses. We talk about crushed feet, crushed heels, and overloaded, but nobody's actually ever suggested that as a material it would compress. And I was able to show that scientifically. So in a normal healthy hoof, it compresses as it grows down. But in a horse with a conformational imbalance, so it's leaning more on one side, putting more stress on the toe, that horn will compress more because it's taking more loading. And that is measurable as well. It's not easily measurable, but it is measurable. So that's not the only reason we get poor-shaped hooves, but it is one of the reasons. And it was a sort of another little jigsaw in the puzzle. And so I was proud to have done that. I showed specifically the time that foals get a particular problem, where they get a tendon problem, and I showed the exact window that happened in, which was always guessed at before. And those sort of things help because, the first thing an owner, if they have a problem with a horse and you get over it, they will say, will this happen again? And I was able to give an age where I was 99% confident that it wouldn't happen again. So I said to a good colleague, a vet, one time, well, I don't expect my PhD will change the world. And he quite kindly said, it might not, Simon, but it'll change our little world just a little bit. And that's all you can hope for, really.
All right, we're going to take a quick little break, and Dr. Simon Curtis touched on the foal, so we're going to come back and talk about that and deformation of the foal. So stick around. You're listening to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. He'll be right back.
Okay. Well, you can probably see from my background that I have quite an old house. It's probably 320 years old or something, which is older than America, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And it's doing just fine, isn't it?
And it's well built and solid.
It's still standing up.
Still standing. Oh, I got to do something real quick. You can talk about me. I can't hear you.
Yeah. I've actually started to work on a few foals again lately. It's been a while, but...
Well, I'm going to look at some as a consultant tomorrow, and the farrier left the message that the 5 foals I might as well trim while I'm there. And I sent the owner a message, said, I hope that's a joke.
Right.
Because I don't even trim foals anymore. I said I'd trim the one foot that's on the one leg. That's the problem.
Right.
Okay, Mike, you ready?
Yep.
Simon, you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. Make sure you follow him over on Facebook. He posted a bunch of different articles up there. You were posting some articles the other day about the... I
don't remember.
You can never remember anything. But where you were talking about you were drawing the triangles on a sketch of a horse and all that.
Those are pretty much things I forwarded from someone else.
Well,
I'm good at borrowing stuff.
At least, when you go over to Mike Stine at Equine Dynamics over on Facebook, he's always posting educational stuff. It's not just the normal run-of-the-mill photos and whatnot. He does post a bunch of different pictures over there. We posted a bunch of different x-rays of the past different podcasts that we've been doing, so you can see all those in real time as we're talking about them here on the show. So give him a like and subscribe over there on Facebook. And my very own like and subscriber on my fire iron side is Mike Stine. How are you?
I'm doing good, Travis. And how are you, Simon?
I'm very good, thanks. I'm, as I say, glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you.
And joining us all the way from England is Dr. Simon Curtis. He is a well-renowned, world-renowned farrier joining us this week. We appreciate him and his information that he's given us. Now, you briefly touched on foals, and during the break, and you can see this during the YouTube video, all the stuff that happens behind the scene, you were talking about that you don't trim foals' feet anymore, and why is that? And why is that your specialty, I guess?
Yeah, it was my speciality, and that's what I made my name on. The reason is I'm 69 years old, and I grew up, as I said earlier, with farriers. I was bred for it. I saw guys that worked themselves to death, and I always made myself a promise that was never going to be me. I still work full-time just about as a farrier. I'm a non-shoeing, non-trimming farrier. I cut down, and then there was a point where I said, yeah, I need to stop doing this completely. So I still get consultancy work. I work with farriers that want to work with me, and I don't work with the ones that don't want to work with me.
That's a good plan.
Really.
So when we talk about the correction of a foal, what are you seeing, or how does that lead into your background of studies?
Okay, the first thing is foals should be as routine, viewed by the farrier at 1 month of age, and should be seen by the farrier every month after that. That happens at high-level sports horses, and it happens at just all the thoroughbred stud farms I know. I realise, and I'm sure there's other breeds where they're prepared to spend money. Sadly, for many other breeds and the backyard breeders, they don't do that. And then at a year or 18 months, when they recognise a problem, it's often too late, because we can do really good things to help the conformation of young horses, provided that's timely. So we do lots of assessment, and we have to work out what the problem is, what type of conformational defect it is, where that defect is, and the age of the horse. And then we can give a good prognosis for what we can do.
The last week's show that we had a Mike brought in an X-ray of a foal that had a cracked coffin bone, or what was it?
Well, that was what the original call was, and that a skyline view, and nothing was really clear. And I had asked for the other X-rays. There were like 7 of them, never saw them, and I'd asked her to send them to Doc Redden as a consult, and of course she decided that she did not want to do that, and
so the lady,
it was already a couple weeks into the injury.
Yeah, so the lady, or the owner of the horse from last week's show, had a supposed crack in a coffin bone. We said that the mother could have stepped on the horse's foot or something like that, because I was like, well, how does that happen? And like you said, a farrier should go out the first month of a foal, and then every month after that up until whatever point that's good for him. And this owner was like, no, we'll just see how, and they bred the foal to be a working horse or a show horse or a professional training horse type deal. And she said, no, that's not good. So you're saying that a farrier should come out, if you're going to have a professional horse or horse in training or a sport horse, every month for how long?
Well, from the point of view of the thoroughbreds, until they're usually sold at 18, 20 months of age. Some foals are sold at 6 months of age. Or if we're talking about sports horses, when they're first shod and they begin their training, which may not be until 3 years old or so. So, but it was long ago. The top horses, the valuable horses, and the top class breeders have known this for over 100 years. It's just a pity that some of the rest of the world is slowly but surely catching up. But undoubtedly, if you go to the sales, whether you go to Keeneland in the States or Newmarket or in Ireland, and if you look at the sales of thoroughbreds, there are very, very few with conformational issues, very few. And all of them have been looked at that pattern. Well, I'm 100% convinced that if you line up 100 professionally bred horses and 100 non-professionally bred, when they're 2 years old, you would immediately see the difference. So when we don't fix these problems, when we have a leg that doesn't work in a nice straight line as a hinge, the force, the horses weigh half a ton and they gallop at 45 miles an hour and they jump high fences. Those forces, if everything isn't lined up, in the end, you either get injuries caused by repetitive strain, or you get traumatic injuries because they just land badly and snap a ligament, not necessarily snap a bone.
Mike, you were going to say something?
Right. When I was working on a thoroughbred breeding operation, we were looking at some of the babies at 2 weeks of age. And here recently, I've had a foal with a crooked leg that I started looking at 2 weeks of age. And we've done some realignment. It actually went real easy. We did not start past trimming up front, but most of the time I get, well, you look at it, well, we'll wait till it grows up and see if we need to do something then. And then it's like, oh, can you fix this? And I'm like, yeah, about 2 years ago.
Yeah, we get that. Still, sadly, get that story all the time. And I would just like to hope before the end of my career that we've spread the message. In the UK, the warm blood breeders, so the sports horse breeders, have taken that on board, most of them. So they are breeding them professionally like the thoroughbred people. One of the main things of that is economics. You know, there's a difference between breeding a horse, that's only worth $2,000 and one that's worth $200,000. When you're breeding at the top end, then you're going to spend the money on a trim each month. But unfortunately, at the lower end, where there's amateur breeders and they're breeding on a budget, it's an easy thing to cut. And of course, they say that quite convincingly. Horses shouldn't be trimmed before they're a year or 18 months. Well, because it fits in with their budgetary requirements.
Right.
But, as I say, the fact is they do need looking at. And Mike made the point about trimming foals at 2 weeks. I was trimmed lots of foals at 2 weeks, but that's why I said as routine. So even if they're perceived to be perfect, the farrier should see them at a month and trim them at a month.
At 2 weeks old, don't they still have the feather on the feet? At 2 weeks old, they don't have.
No, that's gone.
Oh, is that gone already?
Well, they've got a big problem if it's still on there. That's because that means they have a flaccid tendon and the bottom of the foot's never touching the ground. In a healthy horse, it's gone in 2 days.
Yeah, most of the time, I mean, it's like when I was working the thoroughbred breeding operation, I was there every other week. You look at a baby at 2 weeks, everything looks good. We'll see him next time around. We got something odd, maybe we take a little bit something there. I mean, you know, just depending on the situation.
Are you seeing anything that the Americas are doing different than the UK? Because, like I said, we've talked to other people in the UK, and they say, well, our rules are a little bit more stricter as far as who is what and what can take care of who and when, as to where here in the United States, anyone with a truck and a forge can shoe horses and stuff. Are you seeing anything different in the Americas that is good or bad compared to the United Kingdom?
Well, yeah, we have regulation in the UK, but funny enough, it doesn't cover trimming, so anybody can trim a horse in the UK. It only covers nailing shoes on because governments, they could see that looked dangerous and difficult to them, so that was the thing that was the main part of the regulation. Different in the States. I mean, the great thing about the States is that people really try out new ideas, whereas in the UK, people are more conservative. So when I started coming over to the States 40 years ago and going to conferences and meeting farriers, and I used to say it was great because it was like a laboratory for me. You were testing out all these ideas, some of them great and some of them became successful, and others which were really wacky on your horses. And then it was for people like me to filter, what was good and what was useful, what was practical. And in fact, just going back to my PhD, that is part of the job of a PhD, is to translate scientific talk into language that your industry understands. And so I still, carry on doing that in my everyday work. And that's why I still visit the States at least once or twice a year.
All right, we're going to take a quick little break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into Simon Curtis's clinics, workshops, and why you should continue learning, talking about coming over to the United States at a younger age and learning all that stuff. So stick around. You're listening to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. He'll be right back. You having a good time, though? That's the only thing we worry about.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I love this. I noticed as my career progressed, I probably was on TV more times than most farriers, mainly because most farriers say, I don't want to do an interview. And everybody said, oh, Simon will do one. I even came to the States at one convention a long time ago, and I saw a camera. There was a TV crew there. And I said to the guys with me, you watch this, I'll get on TV. And they went, don't be so arrogant. And I said, just watch. that's where the English accent in America comes in, because as I'm walking past them, I just said in my best English accent, "Hello, guys." And they're like, "Oh, where are you from? Will you do an interview?" And these other farriers are looking at me going, "I just can't believe what he just did." So
Exactly.
I never saw it. I don't know.
A little weird, but yes. Straight vodka.
Actually, I always use the same jokes, and if I'm at a conference or something and I do this, I go, "Thanks for the gin and tonic." Beer. Do you know what? I actually had a conference where they put gin and tonic in it without me knowing, because they'd heard me make the joke before. And I took a swig.
Did the old spit burst thing. Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. If you don't want to go on the air with us, that's fine. A lot of people don't like the sound of their voice. You can always email Mike Stine a question at any time. Go to equinedynamics.com. At the very top of the page says contact us. Fill out that little form. There's a little drop-down menu, say podcast. Ask Mike Stine a question. Make sure you put a physical return address in there, because we have some stickers, some magnets and stuff we'll send out to you just for being part of the show and sharing us with all your friends. Make sure you do that. Go to equinedynamics.com. Keyword contact at the very top of the page. And over to my far inside, my very own keyword is Mike Stine. How are you?
I'm doing good, and still glad to have you with us, Simon.
He's still with us.
Yeah,
and
he hasn't left yet. And he's thinking about it.
And joining us this week, Dr. Simon Curtis, who's also a farrier, started at the age of 16-ish or so, and later on in his years went and got his PhD in psychology, and now he's doing both ends of the horse. He's working on the head space and the foot space at the same time. Thank you for joining us.
I didn't get a PhD in psychology, I have to tell you.
Oh.
It might have been useful. It was in physiology.
Physiology. It's one of those.
Physiology.
It's one of those PH words where they all look the same.
Physiology.
Yeah, it's just one of those ologies. Yeah. Still, you got to deal with the horse's brain, which is no fair treat in anyone's aspect. Now, you said you came over to the United States in your early 20s, and you were listening to all the Wild West shows as far as the farriers and what Americas were doing over here as far as doing the horse's feet and different tactics and techniques and stuff. So, you mentioned that you started doing clinics based on, you don't trim farriers, or you don't trim farriers' feet. That would be disgusting.
That would.
maybe that's a position that hasn't been made yet, But you were trimming horses' feet, and then you were helping farriers, not necessarily trimming the feet, but giving the idea and the tools of learning how to trim the horses' feet. And so tell us about your clinics that you give and the workshops that you partake in and you demonstrate, and why the continuing education of learning is so important. I know we can say it time and time again, but it's great to hear someone else's view on outside of that.
Okay, well, you mentioned Dr. Rick Redden earlier. I stayed at his place on my first trip over to the States, and I think that was 86. I also stayed with Dr. Doug Butler, another great name, and I had a great tour of America. So that was part of my learning process. And so I kept coming back because you were also hospitable here and looked after me well, and even occasionally laughed at my jokes, even if you didn't understand them. And so I kept coming back. Ultimately, as my career progressed, I got asked to do clinics and lectures at conferences. And that's really a main part of my life now. I still usually average come to the States twice a year. In fact, next year I come to North Carolina, because I know that's where you are. And there seems to be something about Carolina and North Carolina and Tennessee that keeps drawing me back, because I hadn't been to Tennessee. I think I counted up 32 states in the Union I've been to, and I've never been to Tennessee, and then I got 2 invites in 1 year. But North Carolina next year. And I do various things from, because I don't shoe anymore, there is no point me shoeing a horse. I don't want to do a not excellent job and everybody say, "Oh, I thought he used to," or wasn't he supposed to be good? So I do occasionally do clinics where I have an assistant. I do a 2-person clinic. So they're doing the hard work and I'm pointing and explaining, which has got to be the best place in the world to be. And then I do lots of lectures, and so there's various formats that I do. The big conference, which has moved back to Cincinnati next year, I'm speaking there again in, I think it's the first week of February, and then I go to your neck of the woods, North Carolina.
Where in North Carolina will you be?
I have forgotten, but it is for the
Boo!
North Carolina Farriers Association. So somebody needs to look it up, or I don't know. I've got it down in my diary, and I've got it. I'll start preparing for it sometime in December. And I think I've got my airline tickets. Well, if I could look them up, I'd tell you exactly where I was going.
Well, if you're anywhere near the Charlotte area, make sure you give us a holler, and we'll have you here in the studio. So, but that's down the line.
All right. Well, I'll do that because I know I'm flying out of Charlotte, so I must be pretty close.
You're about 45 minutes away from us.
Yeah. So clinics, obviously, clinic normally that implies a hands-on, and so I am doing less of that now, but I am still doing the clinics and workshops. I just think one day the phone will stop ringing, and that will be that. But up until the time it stops ringing, it takes a lot for me to say no. I almost always say yes because
he even said yes to me.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
So
I said you even said yes to me.
I did, yeah. Mike. So yeah, I know that's occasionally that gets me in trouble. I'm not saying yes to you, of course. And of course, we met. I've known Mike, just bumping into him off and on over the years, and I did a clinic in North Carolina.
Yeah, at Martin's place.
I don't know. It's only about 2 years ago, Martin Kenny's place, and we met there. But we usually bump into each other at one of these big conventions,
right?
Each year. So that's how you get to know lots of people in the profession, really.
So what if I was to come to a Dr. Simon Curtis's clinic or stuff? What am I looking for? What is your main topic? Like when I go to see Dr. Redden, I know exactly what he's going to be doing in different angles. If I go see whatever longliner trainer, I know exactly what I'm getting into. Everyone has their own specific part of the horse or part of training what they're doing. What am I going to get with a Simon Curtis clinic or workshop?
Okay. Well, funny enough, for the first time for the inquiry for North Carolina next year, I sent them 12 topics. So I do have 12 topics, and they said, we don't know what to choose now, because I said you probably better just choose 6. So starting off with, when you think about my PhD, I studied the hoof in not more detail than anybody else on earth ever has, but probably only 3 or 4 have studied it as much as me, because there's very few PhDs based on the horse's hoof. So I try not to make that the sort of boring anatomy physiology talk. We look at the way the horse develops its leg and how that affects the hoof. And of course, there's this, either virtuous or vicious cycle, depending on what we do, where the shape of the leg, the conformation affects the hoof. The hoof then distorts, and that then affects the leg more. And we see if we can reverse that so that we get a better shaped hoof. Does that help the leg? And especially if we attach extensions or something like that. I try and avoid laminitis. I used to have to speak on laminitis at various things. Everybody has their own cure. And I actually think that lots of people do the same thing to every horse with laminitis. And some of them respond to it. But I think there's no adaptation. Anyway, that's my opinion. And I've managed to stay away from laminitis. Foot balance, nobody had really heard of foot balance, I know 30 or 40 years ago, but it's been refined and refined. And the great things we can do now, we have various ways of recording movement and gait. We have force plates and pressure mats that can measure that. Now, we can't use those as farriers in our everyday work because they take too long to set up, they're too expensive, etc. But the point is that when you learn at a clinic, sometimes using that sort of thing, you then apply it. It helps you understand better your shoeing. So you apply it when you go out on your everyday work. What else do I do? Well, we've had a surge in synthetic materials. Most of the ideas have come from the States, but so I find it a little bit ironic that I'm teaching the Eskimos about ice sometimes, and but I, because I like to think whenever anything was new, I always tried it. That it's quite funny, the surge of glue shoes now, whereas I was gluing on shoes 35 years ago and trying it. And my father before me was experimenting, when the first super glues came out, and I think that was in the early 70s. And he was given one little bottle of super glue, cyanoacrylate, by one of the companies that developed it, and to try it, because they were getting everybody to try and see if stuff worked. That would have been $300 for that bottle.
Wow.
And so I sort of got that off my father, that he always used to say to me, there will be a better way to shoe a horse. And he said that to me as an oldish man, and so that's the sort of thing where you have to be positive. Whereas I think farriers are renowned for being conservative and just saying, that's the way I've always done it, or that's... And certainly, as I said, there's fundamental skills that you must never lose. And I've heard Mike say, it doesn't matter what you're putting on, if you've got to get the trim right beforehand. So there's fundamental skills, but nevertheless, some of these new materials are changing the way that we shoe horses slightly, and they are better for the horse. And so I've always been keen on that. So I still do a clinic on modern materials, which now I'm not actually shoeing myself, means that I have to keep updating myself, which is got to be good for me.
Well, I'm glad you said that you're doing a new clinic on the new materials, because I have a question. I don't know if you're going to have the answer for it, but with everyone now, with the new materials and everything coming out, not doing the iron, we've gone from iron shoes from wood shoes to iron shoes to aluminum shoes now that are being out there, and using leather and stuff. And now anyone with a 3D printer is now can print out a synthetic shoe and then slap a horse's picture on it and charge you 3 times as much. Do you think that the technology's there yet, or are people just trying to get into the money cash that is a horse community as far as printing these shoes out? And I'd like to hear, I'd like to see a clinic. And you said that you do a clinic on new structures, new materials and stuff, like the pros and cons and what to look for that's good and what to look for that's bad.
You always ask me 6 questions in one sentence.
I know.
I don't know whether you...
And give one sentence for all of them.
Guests, or you're just picking on me.
No, I do it with everyone.
Let me see. So, where were we at? We were at... I'd have to correct you. The first horseshoe was not wood. I know people... It's like the hippo sandal. It was clearly a shoe for a footsore horse. No horse could trot or gallop in that. So iron was the first thing. Aluminum in the 19th century, and it's amazing how quickly certainly the racing industry cottoned onto this. I'm sure some big aluminum mill, they said, they've got racehorses in training. I know what we'll do. So actually, it was one of the first uses of it when they finally got to be able to produce aluminum cheaply and on an industrial scale. So we were with that for a long time, but people have been trying glues. And if you look, we talked about old books earlier. There was certain patents for doing different things. People have very inventive minds. Oh, and you said about, are they just doing this to make money? Of course they are.
Yes.
I do not need to tell an American that it is the desire to get rich that drives the world and drives innovation. So, of course they're doing that for that, and I find it phenomenal how much some of my colleagues get now, and good luck to them. That's the way the world goes. But what really happens with successful innovations? It starts off as pioneering, and then it becomes routine. And when it becomes routine, the price drops. And It's in that process. Some of the glue shoes, I think, are starting to go through that process of going from pioneering and experimental and becoming routine, because there's way more people using them now than 30 years ago when the stuff came out. Most farriers just said that's not for me, or it will never work, or and didn't use it. That's not the world we're in now.
I personally have a hard time, and I'm not even a farrier, of accepting that you can put something that you've printed off your printer, your 3D printer, and put some silicone glue and then stick it on a horse's foot, and it's going to last for the cycle of its next shoeing.
Well, it can in the right conditions. I've done a few.
Oh, have you really? Okay, Mike.
And it is, there's only certain materials that are printable. We've got to remember that. And they're not always the most suitable to go on the bottom of a horse's foot. That was the bizarre thing, that iron on metalled roads, it has just enough slip, but also enough grip naturally until it gets worn down very fine. And aluminum is quite similar. Then we get into some other materials. People immediately tried, or they've been trying rubbers and plastics for 130 years. Now, rubbers grip a bit too much, and it was found that horses, although there are some rubber shoes that are still sold, when they grip that much, each time your horse, it breaks, the foot breaks too quickly, well, the weight of the horse has to go somewhere, so it goes into the joint. So over a long term, those type can cause problems. Then the plastics, which are harder, and they tend to be more slippery on some surfaces. So all of these materials bring about their own problems. It's not that simple. And 30 years ago, I remember a guy phoning me up and he said, I can make you a plastic shoe that you can glue on. And I had to say, so what? I don't think he'd ever seen a horse before. And he just thought, I know this material can do it. And I tried out these shoes on a horse, on a firm surface, and it was like it was on roller skates or on ice.
Yeah. Right.
And the trainer just looked at me and he said, "Take them off now." And so people, so we immediately can make that problem about the materials. It's got to be an improvement. I always think if you innovate, for it to be successful, it's got to be two of three things: cheaper, better, easier. So if it's all three, it's probably going to be a success. If it's two of those, it might be, because perhaps we'll pay more if it's easier and better. But if it's only one of those, it doesn't take off. So that was always my test for when people say they've got a new product. And we all love new products looking at them. Mm-hmm. You've only got to see the farriers at a convention or the trade show. They're going around saying, what's the newest, shiniest tool? They're like magpies. That's what they want to pick up.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to take one little break and let you get back to enjoying your pony. So stick around. You're listening to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. He'll be right back.
Yeah.
I don't
mind at all.
I do take offense to the shock.
If I leave Travis confused, I've done my job.
What do you take offense at, Travis?
I do take offense to the American shock jock thing. So the
American
shock jock. When you said that.
Oh, come on.
No,
I mean that's it's just that you have this very quick, energetic manner that we don't tend to have in any of our disc jockeys.
No, I know. I'm kidding. I'm kidding with you, but it's funny that
I'm going to apologize on air. That's the first thing I'm going to say.
You don't have to do that.
Well, you're not wrong.
But there's people when you say shock jock here in America, they automatically think Howard Stern and what a creepo, what a douchebag and all that stuff. So when you say shock jock, I just kind of go, oh, am I that bad?
No, I just meant you're.
I know. I know exactly what you mean. So don't worry. I'm not taking offense to it at all. I'm just giving you a hard time. But I just think it's funny that's the first time everyone's ever said that to me. It's kind of an honor at the same time, but it's a backslap at the same time too.
An honorable backslap.
No, we're good. Everything's good. I'm happy with you. Welcome back to Equine Dynamics with Mike Stine. Don't forget, you can join the podcast at any time. Your voice can be heard right alongside of us. Go over to equinedynamics.com. At the top of the page says, join the podcast. Your voice can be heard alongside of us here in the studio. We broadcast every Monday morning at 9 p.m. That's my other show. 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And you can also follow us over on YouTube. See the whole entire video in its whole entire length, completely uncut and unscripted. Over there on YouTube, search Equine Dynamics on YouTube. Give them a subscribe over there. Creeping up on 3,000 viewers over there, and every channel, every video is getting getting a couple thousand views on that. So you're doing well over there, and make sure you follow him over on Facebook as well. And my very own social media star over my far right side is Mike Stine. How are you?
I'm doing good, Travis and Simon. And Simon, it's an honor to have you with us.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
I told you he gets so flustered. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, we're hanging out with royalty today.
Mike gets so flustered when we have a guest that he gets almost like star-studded. And then on the opposite side, if we had a guest at the end of the show where it says, you know what, I said I was glad here at the beginning. I'm not glad anymore. I'm tired of this.
That's what we usually get, yes.
I'm out of here. All right. So, Mike, what did we learn today?
What did we learn today?
Talking to Dr. Simon Curtis, we learned about his PhD studies in physiology. Did I say that right, Simon?
You did.
Okay.
Equine physiology.
Equine physiology. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, my PhD studies concentrated on young thoroughbred foals and their hooves. So it looked at how conformation and how conditions, deformations of the leg, how they change the growth pattern of the hoof. And so we were able to show quite clearly why hooves distort and why, as a 5-year-old, you have a horse with a club foot. Well, that horse got its club foot between 1 month and 4.5 months of age. So we know that now. So there was quite a few things that I learned in that. Just the way the hoof grows, for example, will lead other people to improve things, because obviously poor quality hooves that don't grow fast enough are a problem to the horse owner. They're more of a problem to the horse as it happens, but it's the horse owner that pays the bills. So I think that's really the mainstay of my PhD.
Now, you slowly touched on the foals and the correction of the foals. What else you were saying? What was the time frame as far as when the horse is born, and how many times, or when the first shoeing or first look at, as far as the horse's hooves?
Well, all horses, all foals deserve a farrier looking at them at 1 month as routine. If the owner sees a problem or perceives a problem, then they should get the farrier in there earlier. And then from that point onwards, as routine, the foal should be trimmed once a month until it either goes into training or it reaches maturity. And I should have said that. Actually, one of the things my PhD found was that foals grow at twice the rate of their mother. So and when you think their hoof is half the size of their mother, proportionately they're grown at 4 times the speed. Well, anything that changes that quickly can grow out of shape. And so that's another reason for looking at them early on.
What about X-rays? When would you recommend getting X-rays, or the laterals and the up and down as far as a horse's hoof? Within the first month or within the first year?
No, I mean, the professionals I work with, they always do very comprehensive pre-sales radiographs. Otherwise, the only reason I would be looking at a radiograph is if there's a problem or a concern. Obviously, the great example is laminitis, in that the hoof might look totally normal outside, but inside things are changing very quickly. If there's a conformational fault that we can't actually, should we say, specify, then of course radiographs will often show, what we cannot specify just by seeing from the outside of the horse.
And also extending your learning and education by clinics and workshops. And what clinics and workshops do you offer?
Well, I offer, obviously my forte is the young horse, but I think foot balance, and I've looked at things like shoeing horses with MRI diagnosis. The MRI diagnosis, all big veterinary practices now have MRI, and farriers are never going to be taking an MRI, but they need to understand how those, again, have increased the knowledge of conditions and lesions that we can shoe for and we can help the horse, but we need the diagnosis. Although it's not going to be us diagnosing, if we don't have some understanding of those images, then it's like somebody speaking Cantonese to us. Apologies to any of your Chinese listeners.
I'll apologize to them. All right, and where can our listeners find you, and how can they get a hold of you?
Well, they can find me if they go to my website, Dr. Simon Curtis. If they Google Dr. Simon Curtis Farrier, I'll come up in all sorts of forms. I have 2 Facebook platforms, one as Dr. Simon Curtis and one as Simon Curtis. Unfortunately, if you just Google Simon Curtis, of course, there is a film producer and a musician who is way more famous than me. But if you put the word Farrier in, up I pop. So you can find me with that. On my website, I have my books that are for sale. I also do, believe it or not, a wonderful podcast called The Hoof of the Horse. And in that, I have interviewed all sorts of people and had all sorts of fun. That is a free podcast. So we don't get a lot free, do we, in this life?
No, we don't.
And people can go on there and they can have a look and listen and give it a try.
So once everyone's done listening to this podcast, you can jump on over to Dr. Simon Curtis's podcast as well. Mike, you want to add anything?
It's always a treat to spend a little time with Simon, and you can always learn so much. If people have a chance to get to Simon's clinic, they really need to take advantage of it.
Thank you. You put that far better than I did, Mike.
Well, we'd like to thank Dr. Simon Curtis, joining us all the way from the UK, for joining us this week on the show.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
On behalf of Mike Stine over there.
Have a good day. Enjoy your ponies, and we'll get back to you next week.
My name is Travis, saying see you next week.
We survived it.
Awesome show. And even if you still had that 10 o'clock or 3 o'clock appointment, you're still in time for that. So there, I told you I run a tight ship over here.
Excellent.
So I'll tell you what's going to happen now. So Mike's going to go away. He's going to leave the property here. And I'm going to edit the audio portion. I'm going to have some...